Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome on to Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about engaging with your workforce. It's increasingly becoming more and more important, as we all know. We probably spend more time of our lives with our fellow workers than we do with our families. So it's important that we get the best out of our colleagues. So what happens then if for some reason that link has broken? What can we do, and how can we engage with our workforces? How can you engage with your workforce and achieve employee engagement? Now, joining me in the studio on today's program is Deborah. She's the founder of Minerva Engagement, and we're talking about employee motivation. But we start with today's buzzword about neuroscience.
I think the issue with neuroscience until more recently is that it's been great to talk about it. The science has been massively interesting and people can understand it from an individual point of view, but it's been very difficult to understand or work through how to bring that to life within an organisational setting and how to apply it practically within business. But I think we're starting to really understand that a lot more now, and it is helping and it is supporting what we're doing around the engagement agenda.
All right, now we are going to be talking, as we said today, about what businesses can do when it comes to employee engagement. You go into a number of businesses. You've worked for large blue chip organisations around the UK. You've seen the problems that many companies actually experience. When you walk in, Deborah, what's the classic? Is there a classic mistake that senior management within an organisation may make?
I think mistake's probably too harsh a word, but there are classical things that are going on that you can extrapolate across many different organisations. So I think we hugely underestimate the impact of the emotion and the emotional agenda that we all have as individuals. So within organisations, we tend to communicate and we tend to engage very much on a rational level. So we are very much driven by strategy and process and facts and figures, but we forget that as human beings we're very emotional, and when we're receiving information we receive it first and foremost, even though we may receive it unconsciously, we receive it first and foremost on an emotional level. So you can't underestimate that emotional agenda, and most of the time within organisations, because of the way that we've been trained, we tend to jump straight into the rational explanation. I think the other area that we underestimate greatly is our attention spans. So one of the big surprises that's come out of neuroscience is that we have very limited attention spans. So if you overload us with lots and lots of different information, if you're not really focused on what it is you want us to engage with, what it is you want us to hear, we can't digest it, we can't take it in, we can't do anything with it because it tires us very, very quickly. So we don't have the attention span to concentrate on lots and lots of different things. And unfortunately, in a lot of organisations, because we're going through huge change and that change is speeding up, we don't take the time to really distill down what is it we exactly want to land, what is it that it is really important that people understand, what is it that we want them to do as a result of what we are communicating. So the attention span is also complicates matters.
So is it a case then that we start with all good intentions? We kick off and we do go through the process of communicating with our workforce. We do say all the right things. Is it a case that we don't say it enough times to them, or is it a case that we don't put it in a format or a form that will resonate with them as a workforce? Is that the bit that we get wrong? Because I think if you talk to many organisations, they do think that they are communicating with their workforce. They're sending out the newsletters, they're sending out the emails, they're doing all the communication. Is it just going into the big drawer marked B for bin?
I think there's a number of things, actually. If you look at what gets in the way of change particularly, or if you look at what gets in the way of me being able to engage with something that you're saying, there's a number of different factors. One is attitude and beliefs. So we have very deep-seated attitudes and beliefs, and they take a lot of time to shift and to move. So therefore, if you're asking me to change something that's fundamentally going to alter the way I think about something or I do something, you have to meet me on in my belief system. You have to move my belief system. That takes a lot of time. It's not something you can do in 2 weeks. It's not something that you can do on an email. And I think a lot of organisations underestimate consistency over time and the amount of time that's required. Also, to change somebody's belief system, the only way that you can really do it is to increase their knowledge around a certain subject. So yes, you can tell somebody about something, but you have to engage in more conversation and debate to impact those attitudes and beliefs, and it does take a long period of time. I think the other area is that we don't understand enough about behaviour. It's coming in now, but up until this point we haven't understood enough about behaviour. So one of the principles on which we operate is the principle of threat and reward. If we are receiving information and we're feeling threatened, we will close down and we won't digest again what's being said to us. And there are a number of different levels where that operates. So if you are threatening somebody's status, it's the scarf model actually, if you're threatening somebody's status, people see that almost as badly as they would view a threat on life. It's a really, really deep-seated threat. And status can be impacted by moving somebody's role, moving somebody's location, not respecting somebody when you're going into a meeting. There's many different ways that you can affect somebody's status, and we don't put enough store by that when we're thinking about engagement and when we're thinking about communication particularly.
There are a lot of managers that are out there at the moment, and they do fear they will nearly manage by fear, or they manage by their extreme character, or by nearly order and command and
control.
Yes,
yeah.
And there are a lot of businesses that seem to be still run like that. Is this like legacy from the early days of the Industrial Revolution? That what we've got is that was the way it was. There was the leader did, and you didn't question. And we've just become a bit softer when it comes to the way that businesses are organised and run these days.
I think a lot of leaders, to be fair, these days are trying very, very hard to engage their teams and engage their wider organisations on more of a knowledge-based approach and more of a sharing of ideas. So the command and control is still there. I think a lot are trying to move away from it. It doesn't work. I mean, it used to work maybe when we were less developed and less evolved, and when we didn't have the thinking capability and we didn't have the knowledge working environment that we've got now, but it doesn't work anymore. The only way that you can really motivate individuals is more through intrinsic methods and intrinsic methodology. So if you look at the way that we're motivated, we tend to, through the command and control type approach, lean more towards extrinsic motivators. So that comes through pay and process. So what you're doing is you are rewarding good behaviour and you're punishing not so good behaviour. That's a very slow, archaic way of making change. And actually, if you look at Dan Pink, he's done a lot of work around the theory of motivation. And this is also being supported by what's coming over the fence from the science community now. As individuals, we are motivated much more effectively intrinsically, and that's things like sense of purpose. So if we have a sense of purpose that aligns with our internal sense of purpose and what we believe we're here to do, if we feel that what we're doing is adding value and we can make the connection, that hugely motivates us to go the extra mile. The other intrinsic motivator is autonomy. We like to have a sense of control, and again, this is being hugely underpinned by the research now that's coming through from neuroscience. We do not like having no control. We don't like being told exactly what to do with no voice or no say. It also fits into McLeod's employee engagement factors, actually, because he brought up employee voice. It's the same thing. So if we can go to work knowing that we're working for an organisation that is aligned to where we are and what we believe, if we can go to work knowing that our voice counts and that we have an opinion and that we can contribute to the agenda, again, we're hugely motivated. And the final thing in that theory is around mastery. So, and that again fits into the fact that we're more knowledge workers now. We're more interested in what's around us and the contributions we can make. So the more an organisation can support my learning, the more it can support my growth, the more motivated that I am. So those three things are really important for motivation, and they are intrinsic, they're not extrinsic. You can give me an increase in my pay packet and I'll feel the bounce of it, but probably only for week, 2 weeks, and then something else will come in and I need something else. The intrinsic motivators last for a lot longer. They go on for longer periods of time. The difficulty is that if an organisation is very focused on extrinsic motivators and they're pushing people along that reward and punishment continuum, what it does in effect is it actually reduces the intrinsic motivation that you have internally. So you're reducing the intrinsic motivators that actually would take you further. So it's really not a good place to be.
Really interesting points being raised there. There's a number of people that I know that have found themselves in a similar situation where they've been working for large multinational organisations, and in some of these organisations there is still this whole perception of nearly a bullying culture from the senior management down. And particularly when we've had mental wellness week just recently as well, and things like that taking place, there seems to be a disconnect between industry, I believe anyway, between industry and also what we should be socially doing, the care, the well-being of our workforce. There are some people that I have seen go into an organisation, and an organisation up until that point has been effectively running in black and white, maybe even sepia. They come in with their leadership style, with their engagement style, where all of a sudden they get everybody working with them, for them, and together, and all of a sudden that company explodes in the technicolor. And the results of that for any organisation, for any business, has got to be an increase in profits. And isn't that what we're all trying to achieve? The number of times you see managers who their motivation and the way they manage is just pitiful sometimes. And what you see then is a lack of throughput. And really, you know, as management teams, as managers within industry, we've all got to take a step back and go, are we as effective as we think we are? And is our style as effective when it comes to managing the people that we are responsible for in the workplace? Very interesting program. Really find this fascinating. The whole area of how we engage and how we motivate, how we portray our leadership within business, I think is a fascinating area. It should be the cornerstone of any organisation. All right, let's go back a week. More from Deborah Hume in just a few moments' time here on this edition of Business Connections Live. It's great as always to have your company on today's live programme. Great to know that you're there. Let's go back a week now. We had Sofina Levanti. She was on the programme from Logist Compare. We looked at how Brexit was effectively affecting the logistics industry. An interesting programme last week, as well as far as the programme was concerned. Regardless of where you sit on the fence on this one, if you're Jeremy Corbyn, of course you are sitting firmly on the fence, but regardless of where you sit, whether we should or we shouldn't be having Brexit, we have got to be prepared for whatever the final outcome is. And of course, we've heard a number of stories about stockpiling taking place at the moment. So where do people store all the bits and pieces, the car parts, the food, the drugs that people are going to be needing on an ongoing basis if there is a Brexit? And that's what Sofina was explaining to us on our last programme. It was a great show. If you haven't watched it, we've had some interesting comments on the programme as well on our YouTube channel. If you feel you have a comment, if you haven't watched it yet, please do engage with the programme and let us know what you think, what your take on the whole situation is. But let's get some of the highlights from our last edition of Business Connections Live. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing the implications for Brexit on your logistics, an important area of business for any organisation, particularly if you're importing and exporting particular products in and out of the UK. We needed a real expert on this, so joining me in the studio today is Serafina Valente. She's the founder and MD of Logits Compare.
Well, I mean, I would say at the moment, yes, as you say, we are still into a quite unstable situation with Brexit. With about 75% of companies which, big companies, say over 5,000 employees, they are actually prepared for Brexit. There are things there which can be done and they should be done right now, in my mind. One area example, as we are moving forward very likely with Brexit, or soft or hard, doesn't matter, is impact on tariffs. There is a lot to be done, especially when it comes, declarations. And at the moment, these are so simple to fill, even the actual trackers can actually fill it. But moving into a situation, into a Brexit, they were talking about, start to fill transit forms. So these transit forms will be much more complicated. I mean, if you think about it, every declaration costs around about 15 to 55 pounds per declaration. We are estimated that the amount of declarations should exceed the quota of 1 billion declarations per year. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the automotive sector, especially in import tariffs, are forecasted to go up 2.7 billion and 1.8 billion on exports. So if you think the amount of extra cost which will come on top, how business are going to absorb this cost, I think that there are solutions, optimal solutions, which can help clients to find warehouse space easily and cost effectively. And this is where marketplaces are coming in. This is where Logist Compare, which is my company, is coming in. And what it does help clients to find warehouse space easily and cost effectively. And at the time, time is the essence at the moment for business to find space. As you rightly say, space at the moment is a premium. But, the issue is not just with temperature control business, the same thing applies for the automotive, for pharmaceutical businesses, where the government is actually requesting business to stockpile for urgent medication. The first one which I put in my list is really the increased workforce shortage, which is at the moment, impacting the entire logistics industry, but in particular the warehousing and the transportation side. Number two, it's customs. As you may have expected, with regardless if we are moving for a soft or hard Brexit, there will be some tariffs implication in particular. And also on top of it, there will be an increase of customs declarations and the implementation of transit permits to move the goods to and from Europe. Number three is, I would say, disruption of the supply chain processes of some particular industries, in particular the just-in-time industries, of which automotive is one of them. And the last one, of course, we just mentioned earlier, it's stockpiling. Stockpiling, which is in some ways a consequence, I would say, of the concern for customs delays. Hi, I'm Serafina. I'm the founder of Logist Compare. So the key tips, or the key takeaways, I should say, of the day is, first of all, make sure you do have either an import agent, a consultant, or an internal resource to help you navigate through the tariffs, which very likely is going to hit many different businesses. Two, make sure you bring as much as possible declarations or customs declarations in-house, because customs are very likely going to be inundated with paperwork, and therefore will be further delays. Number three, become AEO certified, which will help you to bring the goods easier through customs. And finally, if you are concerned about delivering the goods on time to your customer, you want to stockpiling, make sure you just, find the right marketplaces which can really help you to do this much faster and cost effectively. One of those is Logistic Compare, where you can just enter your requirements and you'll be able to get in touch directly with the providers and get warehousing options at cost at the touch of a button.
Serafina Valenti there from Logistic Compare, and a really fascinating program. So, I mean, as I said, interesting comments on our YouTube channel about that particular program. And regardless of where you sit on the fence when it comes to Brexit, of course, here we are. We've got elections. This redates the program, doesn't it? Maybe when you're watching this, we've probably got a pink pussycat that's now the Prime Minister of this country. But who knows? There isn't one standing, I've just been told in my ear at the moment. Give it time. There's still time. There's, 13 or so? We've got a baker's dozen who are currently standing, and it's growing at the moment. Anyway, listen, regardless of the outcome, regardless of what happens, come October, then, what's going to happen, it should by then, it may well be, maybe, possibly, even, perhaps, maybe sorted out. What kind of country do we live in at the moment? We can't sort this out. What is going on? Anyway, great program. Do check it out if you want. Just go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. By the way, if you're thinking to yourself, this is a great way of actually communicating with an audience, I would like to have a program just like this for me. Maybe you want to showcase your business at the moment and you want to sit down and tell us about the key benefits around your particular brand, your product, the services that you provide. Then you can always get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live and have a program just like this one. There are different levels, there are different styles of programs. There are shorter ones, there are business showcase programs, and we've got expert guests, or you can come on and have a completely branded program for your organisation, which is a great way. If you've been ever thinking about doing a newsletter, we'll turn your readers into viewers. Why not? Hey, that's going to be more engaging. We talk all the time about engagement when it comes to video. Video is all about engagement. If you put rubbish video up, then people will not watch it. They will get bored. They will skip through it. If you put engaging stuff up that is relevant to them, they will sit back and they will enjoy, because if it matters to them, then they will comment on it. And it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad comments. If they comment, it shows engagement. And you can have a program like this, and simply all you got to do is get in touch with us here. You can drop us an email if you wish to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. That's pretty easy. Better still, pick the phone up and give us a call on 01784 256 777. That's our telephone number. You can speak to either myself, Steve Highland, or to Linda Bazan, or any of the rest of the team who are here, and we'll put together a highly skilled, honed piece of content for you for your website, or for you to send out to your prospective customers or clients. You can do it that way. Don't forget, you can also follow our stream of consciousness on Twitter at BCL Business TV. You can also watch the program live. You may well be doing that right now on our Facebook page. Please do leave a comment as well. But the best place to go, and this is program 360 or something, 264 is the program today. So there's over 264 programs. There's over 300 hours, 350 hours of great content when it comes to growing your business. So go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. Well, you're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is Deborah Hume of Minerva Engagement. She's my guest today. Now, every business is constantly developing, and I asked Deborah if she felt that today's businesses and business owners are keeping up with the necessary changes.
It's hugely different now. Even organisations that are going through a relatively stable period are still experiencing change. Thanks to many different factors, technology for one, for example, we are having to adapt daily to internal and external pressures. So organisations are having to change continuously. Also, because of the complexity of the environments that we are operating within, it's no longer possible for one person or a group of 10 people at the top of an organisation to know exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and what strategy to wrap around it.
You've been at the top of the table, though, haven't you? I know from your background that you've worked in organisations where you've been there. You've been at the top table. Your job has been to communicate downwards to the workforce, or upwards, depending how you want to look at it, but is to communicate to the workforce. You must see that there are restrictions in large organisations these days, that there's only a certain amount that you can do. We've all got this thing in our head that we want to do more, but there's a restriction that we can't do more.
But I'm not sure that's right. So
you can tell me I'm wrong. I don't mind that.
Actually, I think you are.
Talk to the hand. The face ain't listening yet.
I think you are. No. If you operate, or if you think and work to the old way of being, then yes, you're right. It's practically impossible to engage everybody and communicate with everybody and connect with everybody. But if you look at organisations as being made up of many, many different individuals who are linked into many, many different teams, then actually you can think about it and you can work in a different way. So if you forget the fact that a leader and a board are the ones responsible for communication, or the internal communication team, or the HR team, if you work on the basis that everybody has something to communicate, and all leaders and managers actually have a responsibility for making those connections and for ensuring that their teams are comfortable, engaged, understand what the business is trying to do, engaging in conversation, feeding information up and down and horizontally, then actually it is absolutely possible to mine the organisation, if you like, for some of the best ideas and the best thinking around how the organisation should go forward.
In the organisations that you've worked with, do you think that mechanism is there? We see a lot of the downward traffic, but do we see that? I always liken it to a conduit of communication up and down, but a lot of it goes in one direction. It's top down and not bottom up. We had somebody on that was talking about employee comms a long while back, and they put a project into their business called cloud busting, because you had the workforce down here and you had the management up here, and between them was this sandwich was this murky cloud, and what they were trying to do was to burst the information through the cloud up and down, so that, hence the reason they call it cloud busting, so that people were hearing what the board was saying, but the board were also hearing what the employees were saying.
It's broader than communication, I think. It's more about relationships and connections now. And people who are working in the type of organisations that we have today need to be expert at building relationships, managing networks, and creating connections. And you can't do that if you're looking at it purely from a one-way communication channel. And I know a lot of organisations are moving from that now, and a lot have done it and managed it quite successfully. I think where some of the difficulty has been is that leaders and managers particularly have not had the confidence or the tools, to be fair, to be able to do that really well. So if you look at how we're trained, and if you look at the schooling that we have, it's very much, as I say, around the rational thinking. It's very much around logic. We're not taught how to really build great relationships. We're not taught how to extract, well, it's not even extract, actually, that's absolutely the wrong word. We're not taught how to create conversations that allow creativity to flourish, for example. We're not given those tools, and we're not supported through that process. And I think what we're finding now with some of the theories and the science that's coming through, we can actually do that. And I know when I talk to people in business, they find the neuroscience fascinating for a number of different reasons, actually. One, the novelty value. They love learning something new. Everybody likes to learn something new, and the newer it is, the more we remember it, which is great. Two, the fact that we can actually physically understand and picture what is happening. So before, when you talk about behaviour, it's all very grey, it's all very sort of fluffy, and it's all very out there. When you talk about the brain and you say, actually, when people are in a fear state, what happens is the blood flows from this part of the brain to this part of the brain, and when it does that, this piece here goes like that, which basically means nobody can think about anything. people can picture that, and it's real, and they can hold on to it. And once you've worked out the basic principles of it, you can do something with it. So even the fact that you are learning more about how the brain works actually changes how you behave on an individual basis. So you become more mindful of your own behaviours, and you become more mindful on the impact that you're having on others. And when that happens, you can then create environments that are more conducive to conversation. You can create environments that are more conducive to creativity.
But that is an educational thing, isn't it? That and a journey of self-awareness for a senior executive, because as if I know anything, but if you look at a senior executive in an organisation, his particular skills may well be in an accountancy role where it's numerically based, it's formula based, and the skills that we're talking about, and you liken them there to soft skills, aren't they? It's the understanding emotion and being empathetic with if that's a real word, but having empathy with the workforce. And sometimes the two don't sit comfortably together. And it's very difficult for somebody who is process-driven, numerically based, 1 and 1 is 2, to have that empathy with the workforce.
Right, so
can it be taught?
Oh, it can absolutely be taught. It's not, whilst we tend to describe them as soft skills, they're really hard skills. I actually think the empathy, the behaviour, the ability to connect and build relationships and create the right environments is by far harder than it is to learn a logical process or learn your accounting or your lawyer or your engineering or whatever it happens to be.
But some people can just do it, can't they?
Can just do the engineering.
They can have that empathy. There are some people that seem to have natural empathy.
Very few actually can do it really naturally. 1 or 2 can, yes, out of maybe 1,000, but very, very few are natural. The ones that are good at it are the ones that have spent time on it, have thought about it, and self-reflect. And actually, very few of us do that. When we do it, and when we build those skills and capabilities, it becomes really obvious to everybody around. And then everybody says, oh, they're really naturally good at that. No, they're not naturally good at it.
Overnight success, it took 14 years. Yeah.
Practicing. So to give you a really clear example, which actually is helpful not just in organisational settings, but in home settings as well, you just have to look at the law of written and unwritten rules. So within organisations, we will have a whole load of written rules that we will expect people to follow. Then we get massively surprised if they don't follow them. But what we don't take the time to think about is, okay, so what are the unwritten rules? And how are they conflicting with the written rules? So if you have a written rule that, let's say, the customer is always first. I know that, I'm just using that as an example. It can be as wide or as broad as you want. But let's say the customer is always first.
Customer is king.
Customer is king. That is the written rule, whatever that means. It's the written rule. When it comes to the unwritten rule, though, when the customer calls up and the customer is emotional or the customer is upset, we have a written rule that says you have to we have the written rule that the customer is king, but the unwritten rule is, well, actually, when they're on, I need to get off the phone because I've only got this period of time when I can handle the call, and if I don't get off the phone, my manager's going to have a word with me. That's the unwritten rule. So we always follow the unwritten rule. As human beings, we will listen to the written rule, but the rule that we always follow is the unwritten rule.
So is this, some people would call then, and it's something we need to be aware of, is this the lip service of employee engagement? So we know what we should be doing, but actually we do something different.
We don't spend enough time. Some people do, but the majority of us do not spend enough time either in organisations or in our personal lives looking at what the written and the unwritten rules are. And when we don't understand that difference, we're always dragged by the unwritten rule. So if you have an organisation who says, we respect time, we always turn up to meetings on time, that is the written rule, but everybody turns up to the meetings 5 minutes late. The rule is, we don't respect time, we turn up to the meetings late. So once you can start to see the written rules as opposed to the unwritten rules, you can then start to change your behaviour. And the reason this comes back to individuals and leaders and managers within business is because the ones that are good at it are the ones that notice these things. So they'll notice the written and the unwritten rule, and they'll adapt their behaviour, and they'll manage their emotion. If the written rule is, I really respect your opinion, but the unwritten rule, every time you come into my office and I'm under pressure, I shout at you, I don't respect your opinion. You're not going to come into my office very often to talk to me because I know when I go in, you're going to shout at me even though it's written in black and white. You respect my opinion. I have to learn how to manage myself to be of best service to those around me.
All right, listen, we're going to come back. We're going to get right onto the whole area of motivation. One of the most interesting things that comes out of all of this, and we're going to talk about it as well, I hope, is also the repetition as well. It's the number of times that you repeat or you inform or you engage with your employees to get a point over to them. We were talking before we came on air today that it's very easy. In radio, there's an old saying, it takes 2 years to build an audience. 2 years. So the new guy comes on the breakfast show, pop-a-doodle-doo, good morning, it's 6:45. He comes, it takes 2 years for the audience to get under the skin of the whole thing, to become part of it. But the sad thing about it is it only takes 10 minutes or tomorrow for them to forget you. And I think the same applies to a certain extent in employee comms. You've got to continuously be talking. You've just got to keep getting your message out there in all the different ways, all the different facets. You just got to keep talking, because if you stop talking, it takes no time at all. And that's it. You've lost them, and they become disenfranchised with you. They're not engaged any longer with you, or maybe don't even understand perhaps what you're asking them to do anymore. I'm hoping that Deborah will agree with me in a few moments' time. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
And that's what I love about this show. And that's what it's all about. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have you with us on the programme today. Hope you are enjoying the show. If you are in that area at the moment, employee comms is a funny old area actually, and it's so important for businesses to develop and to grow. And Deborah's also been alluding to neuroscience. And as I said at the beginning of the program, like all neuroscience people, you don't talk about it for months and months and months, and all of a sudden, like buses, two of them come along together. And it was interesting because I knew that Deborah was coming on the programme on the previous show to talk about neuroscience, and I bumped into a young lady called Dr. Linda Shaw, who is a neuroscientist, business psychologist and professional speaker, consultant and author. Fascinating lady as well, just a lovely, lovely lady. Got to know her very well too. She speaks up and down the country on the use of the understanding of neuroscience within business. And just to give you a bit of it kind of fits in quite nicely with what we're talking about today. And it gives another perspective as well on neuroscience. So just to give you the key takeaways to Dr. Linda Shaw, here's what she said when she was on Business Connections Live.
Hello everyone, I'm Linda Shaw. I'm a neuroscientist and a psychologist, and I love working with the ambitious. I love working with business owners, business founders, people who really want to do something and understand people to grow their business and maybe get their pot of gold in 5 years' time. So, my 3 takeaway tips for you to make your business grow by building relationships well with your teams and your clients and your customers is, first of all, remember that emotion is key to all decision making. Emotion is key to everything you do. So if you have maybe a message at work or something that's some kind of core value that you have as business, make sure that emotion that you have in that core value, everybody in your firm knows about it. Everybody talks about it, so you're all aligned with the one thing that you really want your customers, your clients to feel. So that's a big one. My second tip is try to build trust as much as you can, but remember that trust has a dark side, so you have to be as trustworthy as you possibly can be. So I think that's really important as well. And thirdly, if you are going to make big decisions, which of course you will have to make big decisions, get others talking, talk to others, get feedback from them, gather your data, and remember your perception is never reality. There is no such thing. Your perception is flawed, and their perceptions you will need to take on board for those really awesome decisions. So good luck.
Good luck. Great lady, Dr. Linda Shaw. If you want to watch the entire programme, just check out Business Connections Live 150. That was the 3rd of October 2016. We must get her back on the programme actually, because they're really interesting. And And really saying a lot of what you're saying as well, which I think is what this is all about. It's that support of individual notions, that support of individual pieces of information that actually show give the comments and everything the real gravitas that each and every comment deserves. Anyway, as I said, it's BCL 150, 3rd of October 2016, and what she also writes on the program: when we understand how our brain works, we can influence our behaviour and the behaviour of others. Communication is the foundation of everything, and getting it wrong causes a tidal wave of problems. Get it right, and everything potentially can run smoothly. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is Deborah Hume. She's the founder of Minerva Engagement. Today we're talking all about customer engagement and also employee motivation. Customer engagement, employee engagement, and also employee motivation. Are the two the same, engagement and motivation, before you strangled me on my last comment? So are they the same, motivation and engagement?
No, they're different, but they work very much yin-yang. They work together.
You were disagreeing with me because I was going on about you've got to keep talking, you've got to keep telling people, you've got to keep saying the same thing repeatedly to people.
Only in part.
So a soft disagreement then?
A soft disagreement. Yes, we do need to keep talking, but I think we need to be very aware of the fact that individuals generally can't focus on a lot of different things. So keep talking by all means, but make sure that what you're talking about is consistent over time, and make sure that it's not bringing in lots and lots of different elements, because that's what we tend to do in organisations. We'll talk about something for a week, then we'll talk about something else next week, and then next month there's another load of initiatives that have just landed, and so on and so on and so on. So we're constantly talking, but actually what we're doing is we're hugely overloading the listener, and we're tiring individuals around the business, and that has a twofold that's a twofold issue, to be honest.
So when are you going to disagree with me then?
No, I'm kind of disagreeing with you that it's not just about repeating the communication. I think also
it's about being laser focused.
It's about being focused on the communication. It's also about creating those connections. I think that's really important. It's not just about communicating. It's about listening. It's a big part of listening and allowing people to engage in the conversation. And the third bit, which I think is really important, regardless of which function you sit in, is this whole piece around connection and social connection. We now know that the social side of ourselves is really important. It takes up huge areas in our brain. So if we're not creating an environment where we can socially connect, where we can engage in conversation, if it's just one-way communication all the time, it's not going to work. And also I think it's not just about throwing the communication out there, it's really understanding that threat and reward dimension, and really being able to plot, are we communicating in a way that's going to threaten status? Are we communicating in a way that's going to threaten a sense of certainty? Are we communicating in a way that's threatening autonomy, relatedness, or fairness? And if we are, then actually we need to do a lot more work to upweight the areas that we can do something about to reduce the threat, and to mitigate against the areas where we really can't do anything and we are going to threaten people. I think the other point to bring in is that the communication can't just flow from a senior team or from an HR team or from an internal comms team. And actually the in-out group dimension is really very strong. If you're wanting to communicate something that is actually going to impact people quite considerably, you need to do it through what we perceive as our in-group. You need to do it through the managers and the leaders that are based locally. You need to spend more time with them than actually you do crafting an email that's going to go from the centre out to everybody. Because the mere fact that it's come from the centre into my area, well, you're an out-group, you're nothing to me, why should I take any notice of this? The fact that you're my manager and you've sat down and talked to me about it and explained it, and I can question it, and I've got some input to give, very important. I'm going to listen. It's
interesting in the linguistics that you use there that we're pulling back, we're being aware of I hesitate at saying it, but threatening behaviour, or maybe getting the message wrong. Is the things that we need not to do are obviously all the negative things, but are there positive things that we can actually plug into this where it nearly makes the motivational aspect of it come alive? Are there positive actions as a manager I can take that as opposed to watching about threatening somebody's position, status or whatever? Is there a positive action that I can take that will make somebody feel more motivated?
Well, that's where these models and these approaches become really helpful, because if you are thinking of talking to your team member, or if you're thinking of sending a communication out, and you know that actually the message that is going to land is going to feel quite threatening for the person that's on the receiving end of it, before you send that communication or before you have that conversation, you need to sit down and think about, what can I say or do that's going to position this in such a way that I'm going to move this person more towards the reward state? I'm going to move them away from this threat state.
How important do you think it is for the manager to understand what the workforce employee's actual job is? Because sometimes that's the disconnect, isn't it? You don't really know what I do. How can you tell me? How can, you know, there's that kind of disconnect, or is that very similar to the fact that there's no empathy between the two people?
If it's the manager of a team, I would expect the manager of the team to know what the team is doing, and to actually have a view and an involvement in terms of how to land that particular message. If it's somebody much further afield, they may not know what that team is doing. One of the big things that usually happens in the centre, though, is there is an awful lot of stakeholder management and audience analysis before you start throwing communications out from the centre. However, that will never ever supplant or be better than the manager's local knowledge of what's happening in that team. So they should really understand that. That's one of the core roles of the team leaders and managers.
Do you think we do enough training? I mean, you took a step back and you've learned neuroscience, the understanding of what's going on in people's minds, what the motivations are behind the decisions that they make. Do you think that we have maybe a generation of managers who don't have just the appropriate training to get the best out of their workforces?
I think that the research that's now coming through is really helpful for that group of people. They've been trained. So to say that managers and leaders haven't been trained would not be correct. They have been trained, but what we have now is more knowledge, more intelligence, more information to really help them manage the behavioural, emotional aspects of their roles much more, and also themselves actually, much more effectively than we've been able to in the past. And I know from the conversations that I've had with different groups, and they don't need to just be managers and leaders, by the way, this is applicable to every individual on the planet effectively, because it's all about how we handle ourselves and how we relate to other people. Once they have been given and discussed and debated even the basics of it, then actually their behaviour changes and the way they relate with other people changes. So for me personally, I think it's hugely powerful and hugely helpful to individuals to understand. So for example, we have a lot of I've been talking about the threat and the reward state. Why is that important? Quite simply, when we are in a threat state, we are basically highly stressed and we're activating our flight-fight mode. Mm-hmm. The thinking part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex bit that sits right at the very front, is responsible for all of our strategizing, goal setting, creativity. It stops our emotional outbursts because it acts as a natural brake. It's basically the big executive center. When we're under stress and we're in that fear state, the thinking aspect of our brain reduces to really considerably. It reduces to practically nothing, which basically means our ability to think stops, and we start to run on our emotional responses and our emotional reactions, which
Is that the point where you press the send button out of anger nearly?
Exactly, that's the point where you press the send button out of anger without having read it properly or thought through the consequences, and as a result you may cause quite a mess. The person who is more aware of their own state and where they are and how they're responding to situations, forget the person who's sending the message for a minute, but the person who's receiving it, they can actually manage themselves, as I said earlier, in a much more mindful way. So you become an observer of your own behaviour, which means that you respond to situations, whether they're in work or whether they're in your personal life, in a much more considered way. If you are sending information, you know, or if you're communicating something, a big change, you know that you're going to put possibly a large proportion of your team into a threat state. You also know that if they're in that threat state, they're going to lose all their creativity, so any creativity is going to go out of the window. They're going to lose all their ability to think logically, so that's going to go out of the window. So unless you can move them more towards the reward state, more out of that threat state, you're losing not just a really good human being because you've made them an emotional wreck almost, you're losing all of that productivity, all of that thinking, all of that strategizing, you're losing the knowledge worker that you employed to take your business forward. So it's really important to understand it. And even if you only understand it on a simple basis or base, it makes a huge difference to you, but also to everybody around you.
Just a fantastic show, some great advice, and I think sometimes we live outside of a bubble and our workforce are inside of the bubble and we just don't get sometimes their fears and their tribulations. And I think what's been interesting about today's programme is the way that Deborah has been able to highlight that for us, and perhaps maybe we'll step back for a moment because we all do it. I think we all do it to a certain extent, but we'll be able to step back for a moment and become better leaders within our organisations and be able to maybe have a more engaged workforce. It always intrigues me when I see these engagement figures coming back. There was one organisation I did some work for, and what would happen is that they would congratulate their workforce on the fact that so many of them got engaged on giving feedback on how they felt the business was going, the employee engagement it was. And of course, the reason that the employees are so engaged, they were taking the opportunity to actually give the feedback to tell them how damn awful they were as a company to work for. And that was the reason. Yet the business saw it as the fact, hey, we've engaged with our workforce because they've all filled in the form to tell us how bad we are. Just got to be careful on these things. More from Deborah in just a few moments' time here on this edition of Business Connections Live. Now, are you an expert? Are you somebody that knows the ins and outs of the industry sector that you're in at the moment? Do you want to raise your profile? Would you like to be the person that the media turn to when they want to get a particular comment on a particular topic? Is that what you would like to do? Would you like to be at the forefront, a thought leader in your industry segment? Well, how do you go about that? Well, the very first thing you do is that you need to raise your profile, and you also need the experience of being able to present and also to tell your message on camera. And that's where we can help you in two particular ways. One way is that we do media training here at Business Connections Live. We bring groups of individuals in, albeit independently or from one particular company. We'll have maybe a group of 6 people who will come in, and we will work with you putting together a media training course so you are prepared to handle the media. And if you want to download a free booklet on how to handle the media, then simply go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. The other thing you can do is thank you very much, there it is on the screen even as I speak. Now, the other thing that you can do as well is to demonstrate that you are an expert by coming on the program and talking to me for an hour. It's dead easy to do that. You can find out more details of how you can be a guest on Business Connections Live by simply going to our website, once again, at businessconnectionslive.com. Be an expert studio guest. You come on the show, fill in the form, explains why you should be contemplating this, what you need to be aware of, what you need to be thinking about, the packages that are available, because at the end of the day, you're going to take this content away. You're going to use it in your internet marketing. You're going to use it you're going to repurpose it for press releases. You may want it more fully branded. You may want to be using it on social media, or you just may want to come on the program and get the highlights from your show. Some basic pricing there from £450. Honestly, what is that to today's businesses to grow your organisation? The 8 key things why you should be doing it. Positioning yourself as an industry expert, promoting your personal brand, compelling media releases, social media campaigns, video that you can use on your website to improve your SEO, introducing yourselves, nearly a video calling card, and then the opportunity to work with other broadcasters to promote your brand. Now, you can come on the program. We give you the complete format of how the show works, how you need to prepare yourself, what to expect when you come on the program. If you want to find out more details, go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. Now, let's go back to Deborah Hume. For the success of any company, what are the key things that business owners should be doing? Here's Deborah.
I think be really clear with your employees on the psychological contract, if you like, that they're engaging into when they join the organisation and when they stay with the organisation. And that's around the purpose of the organisation, the vision of the organisation, the values of the organisation, the things that determine culture and behaviour and the reason somebody's going to invest their time to be there. And we tend to do that very heavily. We talk about that very heavily at the recruitment stage, and then it can be somewhat different when they join the organisation. And I think maintaining that and that level of consistency right through the employee life cycle is very, very hard to do, because it's always easy not to do it.
Because we get used to it,
because
don't we?
we get used to it. And also we're so good at platitudes, and we're so good at using words. And remember, as humans, we don't like effort. So values, to really, for example, to bring them to life, you have to talk about them. You have to engage with them. You have to think about them as part of the decisioning process, as part of the supply process. You have to make them real inside the organisation. That takes effort, and it takes focused attention, which I've said earlier tires us quickly, but it takes a lot of focused attention. If you just stick them up on a poster and put them around the wall, but actually then don't bring them to life or live by them in your decisions, you might as well not have them. If you don't refer to them as in relation to how they're driving strategy and how they're impacting performance, then why bother? You know, so there has to be a balance, and they need to be constantly reinforced.
When you go into businesses and you're talking to businesses about this, do you find senior members within the management team will come up with restrictions of why they can't do that or they shouldn't do it? I mean, what are the excuses?
Well, quite often they'll think they are doing it. It's willful blindness, to be honest. and it's only when you confront, or only when you hold the mirror up and say, well, if you're doing it, why is this happening? Or if you're doing it, why are people here? That they can start to, or that people start to think about it a little bit more deeply. It's very easy when we are surrounded by artifacts and it's written all over our website to think that we are doing something. But actually, unless you've taken the time to understand what that means and what that means for me and how that relates to my behaviour in my role, then I don't know what to do with it. It's customer service. I always find.
Are we talking about empowerment now? So empowerment for an employee to make a decision.
Yes, but using the values as their moral compass, if you like, in terms of what actually bringing the values into life within the organisation, rather than blindly following a process that actually may be incorrect, but nobody's noticed, is against the values. But I'm going to do it because it's the process. Actually, through looking at it through the lens of the values, you could then put your hand up at your next meeting, or you could and say, actually, do you know what? We do this over here. Our values say this. There's a disconnect. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to move this forward? Or do our values matter? Or are we going to hold on to this?
So I take it then, when we look at our values as a business owner, they're not just stuck in stone, are they? Our values must sort of vary with time, place, and people.
Absolutely, and they will evolve, and they will grow, and they will get stronger the more people talk about them and the more people challenge them in different organisations. But you have to take them off the walls, and you have to take them out of the website. You also have to
take them off the wall and put them in their heart.
Oh, Steve,
do you like that?
Yes. Please. But that comes back to written, unwritten rules. That comes back to written, unwritten rules. You know, so we have I don't know, a value of honesty. Okay, so what's the unwritten rule around that? And I think as an organisation, actually, or even as an individual, actually, if you wanted to test it without taking it quite so far, really think hard about what the written and the unwritten rules are in your life and in your experience, and understand what you do stand for and what you don't, and the impact that has on everybody around you. Because as individuals, we do not follow the thinking process, we follow the behaviour every single time. So what you write, and even what you say to me, it's okay, but I'm not going to take any notice of it unless your behaviour supports it.
How do we know when we're there? How do we know when we've got there, when we've achieved it, when we've taken it off the walls, it's in their heart now? How do we know we are getting it right?
You'll never be there. It's an ongoing journey, because as humans, we're constantly growing and we're constantly expanding, and there'll always be new challenges, particularly in the environment we're now in. So it's a constant, ongoing test and learn. And the minute you stop testing and learning, then you go backwards.
But I suppose if you don't have that that position where you know that you've achieved some, there must be measures of achievement. Maybe achievement's the wrong word. Otherwise, it just becomes open-ended, doesn't it?
Oh no, yes, you can see, you can measure how the level of pride people have in the organisation.
It's interesting, the word pride.
You can look at the feedback that you're getting on things like Glassdoor, which tends to be quite honest and brutal in some cases.
Glassdoor?
Glassdoor.
I haven't heard that expression. What's that?
Glassdoor, it's an online job system really, where you can go on and you can rate your companies that you work for and leave your feedback quite honestly and openly.
Crikey.
That's quite good. You can speak to the customers. The customers will tell you that there is a link between shareholder, a very strong link between shareholder, customer and employee. So if your employees are really focused on customer and providing great service and proud of the company, and it's all very positive and challenging but good, the customers will feed that back. It will come back through the customer NPS scores or the customer surveys. There's many, many different ways you can, if you're prepared to listen. Most of us, like I say, we're kind of willful blindness. If you're prepared to listen, there are many ways you can find out how well you're doing and how engaged and what your employees think about working for your organisation.
Do you know, we're nearly there. Do you know that?
Oh.
Come a little closer to me, by the way, because you're drifting
Sorry.
off the screen there on me. There we are. That's better. She's joining. You can see the body language of just doing that, trying to get out the door.
It's the wheels on the chair.
Towards the door. So there we are. Listen, you want to find out more about Minerva Engagement, you'll find their website here. You can tell me about some of the people that are here, actually. If you go to minervaengagement.com, I've gone to the About page, and you'll see that Deborah's there. We've got Judith. And we've got Kath. So you've got a whole team of people here that are there to help organisations. The water cooler pitch about Minerva Engagement is what? 30 seconds.
Well, we specialise in culture change, employee engagement and internal communication. So we're helping organisations improve performance inside out.
It's as easy and as straightforward as that. If you just, we'll just go back on the website again. As I said, at minervaengagement.com, what we do, we improve business and personal performance from the inside out. Where have I heard that before? Love the cartoons that are on there. Defining culture, embedding change, engaging leadership, inspiring teams. Some good stuff on there. And you can see that the quality of their client base is second to none. The likes of BG, British Gas, British Telecoms, Carillion, Coventry, Department of Transport. Well, all sorts of different, but EDF Energy, to name but a few. You can follow them as well on Twitter at Minerva Engagement. You can follow their tweets. We always ask our guests at the end of each and every programme to give us the key takeaways from the programme today. Something for you to maybe go away and to think about over the coming hours or days or weeks. Don't forget, you can always contact Deborah after the programme perhaps. Maybe Deborah coming into your organisation could actually maybe focus you once again on the way that you're doing your employee comms and maybe get a little bit more out of your workforce as well. Maybe make them feel happier too. Deborah, straight down camera at number 4. You know the routine, who you are, where you're from. The airways, madam, are all yours.
Thank you. Deborah Hume, I'm from Minerva Engagement, and we specialise in employee engagement, internal communication and culture change. And I think the main takeaway from today is that employee engagement is very much around building connections and building relationship. It's a long, ongoing process, but it is something that makes a huge difference to sustainability in business, and it requires a different way of thinking and a different way of being than perhaps what we've dealt with before.
Absolutely fantastic programme today. Deborah Hume there from Minerva Engagement. I hope you enjoyed today's programme. It was a real insight as always, and I just hope that you've taken some leadership lessons from that, and it's going to help within your business, your organisation, to maybe get more out of your employees, to engage them more, to make them feel more part of your organisation, and to help you grow your business long term. Once again, a fantastic show. My thanks to Deborah Hume. Don't forget, we've got more great guests coming on the programme in the near future. Media training, don't forget that too. Media training. If you need media training for your organisation, we've got a post that's going to be going up very shortly. The fantastic interview that we saw just this morning, in fact, on the BBC Breakfast Time. They were talking to the UK head of Amazon. There was a question in there that he knew was coming. It was an uncomfortable question. It arrived and the guy didn't bat it away. What he did, he answered it perfectly. A lesson in how to answer the questions you don't want to be asked. We teach you that on our training courses when you come with us here at Business Connections Live. If you'd like more details about that, please do go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. You'll find all the details there, and there's a little tab that says what we do, and also our CPD accredited courses. Now, our media training course is in fact CPD accredited. So if you want to get on that, if you need 6 credits towards your CPD score, then get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live. And that wraps up the programme. Listen, we'll do it all again next week, shall we? When we're going to be live here at Business Connections Live. And don't forget, if you'd like to be an expert guest, get in touch with us as well via our website. But until we do it all again next week, have yourselves a great week and be successful out there.